Oh, another one. I love systems of equations. Quadratic.
All right, so for this one, it's not going to be as pretty as the other one. The other one was really nice because the x term went away. The x term's not going to go away on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 3x plus 24 and I'm going to plug it into the other y. That way we have an equation that does not have two variables but only has one variable, which is the x. Okay, I don't need these parentheses because there's nothing multiplying or just needing to be distributed. And now I'm going to get the quadratic equation to equal 0. So the first thing I do is subtract 24 from both sides. On the right side, I know this is confusing to some of you guys. I'm not subtracting the 24 from the 12 because those are not like terms. The 2 is the like term for 24. So I go 2 minus 24, I get negative 22. The next thing I'm going to do is subtract 3x from both sides. And now I have 0 equals x squared plus 9x minus 22. All right, now there's 3 different ways we can solve this. You can choose whichever way you want. Choose the way that you think is the most understandable, the way that you think is the easiest. I'm going to start with the zero product property. To do the zero product property, I have to factor. So I start by setting it up. I got the x squared in there, the 9x, and the negative 22. Now what you do is you take the 1 and the negative 22, you multiply them together to get the product that you use to help you find the missing 2 numbers in here. Okay, so 1 times what gives me 22? 1 times 22 gives me 22. And so I write that out and I think to myself, 1 and 22 will add or subtract in no way to give you 9. Okay, so it doesn't work. Next number I'm going to try is 2. 2 times what gives me 22? 11. And this one works. If I make the 2 into a negative, I'm going to add those and get a negative 9. So these two add together to give me a 9. And so I'm done. I'm done with that. Now I just got to find the outside numbers. Now I'm going to start by looking at these 2 terms and finding the greatest common factor. What's the greatest number I can divide both of those by? In this one, it's just an x. I can only take a 1x out. And now I'm looking at this spot right here. What times x will give me negative 2x, a negative 2. Next, let's look at this one right here. What times negative 2 over here will give me negative 22, and that's 11. 11 times what will give me an 11x. That's an x. Okay, once you do that, you can write out your factors. Now what I essentially did is I just rewrote this over here as in factored form. And now I can see really clearly that a negative 11 and a positive 2 would give me a 0. So if I plugged in negative 11 into that x and that x, you'll see it gives me a 0. If I took the 2 and I plug it into that x and that x, it'll give me a 0. Okay, so those are my x values. Now I have to find my y values. And so I'm going to take the easier looking function, which is the linear, not the quadratic. The quadratic has more work. I'm going to take the easier looking one and I'm going to plug in my x values. So first the negative 11. After I plug that in and simplify, I get positive 11. I do it again for the other x. I plug in the 2. And when I simplify that one, I get 30. And I'm done. Okay, but I told you guys, I want to show you the other ways that you can solve this. Okay, now I'm going to try to do it with the quadratic formula. In order to use the quadratic formula, you have to know what the a, b, and c are so you can plug them in. The a is the 1, the b is the 9, and the c is the negative 22. So when you plug them all in, this is what it looks like. Next, I'm going to simplify the easy parts, which is the negative 9 and the 2 on the bottom. Next, I have to go to the radical. This is where everybody messes up, so I like to take my time with this one. 9 squared, 81. Next, I'm going to change that minus 4 into a plus negative 4. And the reason why I do that is because everybody messes up with the negatives right here. So don't mess up with negatives. All right, I see a negative times a positive times a negative, which is going to give me a positive number. 4 times 22, 88. Okay, when I add 81 and 88, I get 169. The square root of 169 is 13. Now I have 2 separate expressions I have to simplify. One with a positive 13, one with a negative 13. And when I simplify the first one, I get 4 over 2, and then it simplifies to give me 2. The other one, I get negative 22. When I simplify, it gives me negative 11. And you'll see, it matches the 2 x's that I got before. All right, 2 down, 1 more to go. Let me show you guys how to do this by completing the square. Now, I would normally not complete the square with this one. And the reason why I wouldn't is because I see the 9 right here, and the 9 on the x is not divisible by 2. Because it's not divisible by 2, that means I'm going to get fractions everywhere. So, let me show you guys how this is done. First, add the 22 to both sides. We're going to complete the square now. That's what we're doing. We're solving this by completing the square. Next, I'm going to add a blank to both sides. Then I'm going to take the 9 divided by 2 and square it. That gives me 81 over 4, which completes my square. What does that mean? Well, because this is a completed square, I can factor it. And when I factor it, I get something squared. Okay? Now, I got this x by square rooting the x squared. I got this 9 over 2 by square rooting the 81 over 4. And that's how you factor it. This is a perfect square. When you have a perfect square polynomial, you get to take shortcuts when you factor. All right, now on the other side, I have a 22 adding to a fraction. So I need to make the 22 into a fraction, and I need to make common denominators. The common denominator is 4, and so now I have 88 over 4. I add those together, I get 169 over 4. Next, I'm going to square root both sides, and then I have my plus or minus. I'm going to write up here now. When I simplify that, I get 169 over 2, and no more squared on the other side. Last, I'm going to subtract 9 over 2 from both sides to get this. Now I have a positive 13 over 2 and a negative 13 over 2. When I have positive 13 minus 9, I get 4 over 2. When I have a negative 13 minus 9, I get negative 22. Now both of those fractions simplify, and when they simplify, that gives me 2 and negative 11, which gives me the same x values. Now notice the y values, finding the y values never changed. You can find the x values 3 different ways for this one. I hope that made sense to you guys.